Well, that was a perfect segue to today's reading, as you will see. Good morning, everyone. I'm reading from Genesis 28, 10 through 19, and this is the Common English Bible translation. We're picking up the story where we left off last week. Jacob is fleeing his brother Esau, who has vowed to kill him. He's all by himself. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He reached a certain place and spent the night there. When the sun had set, he took one of the stones at that place and put it near his head. Then he lay down there. He dreamed and saw a raised staircase, its foundation on the earth and its top touching the sky. And God's messengers were ascending and descending it. Suddenly, the Lord was standing on it and saying, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will become like the dust of the earth. You will spread out to the west, east, north, and south. Every family on earth will be blessed because of you and your descendants. I am with you now. I will protect you everywhere you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done everything that I have promised you. When Jacob woke from his sleep, he thought to himself, the Lord is definitely in this place, but I didn't know it. He was terrified and thought, this sacred place is awesome. It's none other than God's house and the entrance to heaven. After Jacob got up early in the morning, he took the stone that he had put near his head and set it up as a sacred pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He named that sacred place Bethel, though Luz was the city's original name. The word of God for the people of God.
Thank you so much, Judy. So yesterday, I was blessed with all three of my sisters calling me. That doesn't often happen on the same day. And I was telling them that I was doing this sermon series on normal family and oxymoron, and they all laughed. And they then asked, each one of them, in their own way, they said, so which one of us are you going to use as an example? And I said, well, I already used Bill a couple of weeks ago, so I'm sure you'll come up. Today I want to talk a bit about I always have to look at self-differentiation. It's got too many syllables in there without me looking at the word to say. Self-differentiation and non-anxious presence. One of the things that people have talked about since when I've started this series is how much they can apply that to their own families. And I always want to give the warning that the only person you can change is yourself. And to know that when you change yourself in a family system, that allows other people that you're responding, your family or whoever is in part of that system, it allows them to choose to change in whatever way they want to respond, in whatever way they want, possibly a change. But to remember that a system is often like a mobile, that's hanging up there. And if you jerk one of them, everything goes all over the place. So if you are, in a certain family system and you decide to behave differently, particularly if you decide to sort of speak truth, that the first reaction is not going to always be pleasant. They're not going to say, oh, gee, I'm glad that you are finally going to help us be a functional family. They're going to be upset. And doing self-individualization can be, or differentiation, I should say, can be a lonely job to begin with. Wasn't always that my siblings would thank me or would laugh and talk about our dysfunctions and how we've worked on them. I had my younger sister, who was sort of the one that gave me the best response, the one that's just younger than me. I told you, I think a couple of weeks ago, that when I talked to her about a family issue, she said, I don't get it. Why do you always have to look at the dark side of things? Why do you have to bring up these things? You're probably making them up anyway. I don't want to talk about it. And that was the best response I got. So it can be lonely work, but it can also be fruitful work over the years. When you look at Jacob, just as John was saying, Jacob was on the run. He had stolen his brother's birthright and blessing by trickery. His brother wanted to kill him. His mother sent him back to the family that she came from in Haran. And he was on a journey that can really sort of begin a journey of description of self-differentiation. He's going from an enmeshed family where he's learned how to manipulate and get things his way. He's going to be tricked by his future father-in-law. Sort of tables get reversed or they get turned on him. And he's going to learn who he is, and it takes him a very long time to become the person God wants him to be, or at least a close picture of that. Eventually, he gets renamed Israel, and his 12 sons become the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. But it takes many years and many shapings and many experiences to do that. In our lives, we don't have particularly any rituals for adolescents to go out and figure out who they are. In many cultures, there were these different rituals to say that they've gone from childhood to adulthood or with that process. I had a friend years ago who told me that when her daughter was a teenager, she was giving Nancy all sorts of trouble. And Nancy turned to her and says, "Why do you have to be like this?" And her daughter said, "I'm just doing my job." And she was right. She was doing her job of learning who she was. And the first way that we do that, usually in our teens, often in our 20s, is figure out who we are not, right? We are not our parents. And please don't tell a teenager that when they're in their 30s, they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, I just sounded like my mother." Because they want to learn who they are not. I told my kids, don't get married till you're 30. Because when you're married, you have to give some of yourself to your partner. And you need time to figure out who yourself is. You need to differentiate yourself from your family. And begin that process of learning who God has called you to be. Now, hopefully, they go out in surrounded by love and the openness of their parents to allow them to become who they are. You know, in all the messed upness of my family of origin, the one thing that I was sure of was that my parents loved me. And that my dad, who was the dreamer and the chaos creator and the one that took us all over the world, that was a wonderful thing. You know, he was the one that told us we could become anything we wanted to be. But our mother was the rock. She was the one who kept her feet on the ground, who made sure we all turned up in the same country together, which was we were often coming from different countries to end up in the same country together. So that took some feet, and I'm reading her letters to her sisters and seeing how complicated that was to make sure that we arrived from the different schools we were at the different places to all show up for Christmas or for the summer holidays. She was the one that made sure all our passports were updated and in place, that all the tickets were there. She was the one that made sure that in all my dad's flights of fancy and wonderful dreams, that we got to school on time. You know, those little kinds of things. That kind of love helped us overcome all the other dysfunctions that are part of a normal family. So when you're in your 20s, you are really learning how to separate yourself. My youngest sister, Carolyn, when her oldest went off to college, she called me one day, and by then my fourth one was in college. And she called me one day and she said, I don't know what to do. Matthew hasn't called me for I don't know how long. You know, he was first year at college. And she was in Phoenix, he was in Tucson. It wasn't too far away. But I said, well, how long's it been since you've talked to him? Because it was only like, October or something. She says, I haven't talked to him for 2 weeks. And I said, and you're worried? And she said, well, yes. And I said, you have his phone number? Yes. He has yours? Yes. So what's the issue? Well, he hasn't called me. And I said, his job is to not call you. His job is to figure out who he is. College is the perfect place. I said, Mike has been in college for 3 or 4 years. I call him like once a semester. I know how to get hold of him if I need to. He knows how to get hold of me. We text occasionally. But our job is to back off and say, we're here if you need us. Let us know. By the time her third one got to college, she called me and she said, how do you stop them calling you? That was her daughter, who's now expecting any moment her first baby. The job of when we start in our teens is to self-differentiate and to become the own person, and that job continues throughout our life. I want to differentiation of self is the ability to separate feelings and thoughts, not feelings from thoughts, but to be able to recognize your feelings when you are in some kind of interaction with some people, and yet to be able to say, is that how I want to react? If the person's making me angry, do I want to respond angry? Or do I want to respond calmly? If the person is all anxious, do I want to become anxious? Or do I keep that non-anxious presence? And or if their son is talking to them and they want them to be quiet, right? So our job is to sort of separate our feelings and our thoughts, not say we're not going to feel those feelings, but to look at them and say, are these appropriate feelings to express at this point? Is this person really talking about me or about something in their own life? I can tell you throughout the years of ministry, I have had a number of people be this close to me, yelling in my face about something they thought I said in a sermon. Not even necessarily something I said in a sermon, something they heard, because that's what they thought I would say, and so they heard it that way. Sometimes it was something that I said, but sometimes it was not that at all. And my job was to look at them and say, what's going on in their life that makes them so angry and so upset and so fearful that they have to respond in this way? And to respond to them in a way that they need to be responded to, not in a way that I want to do it. To not take any of that in as personal. To be able to see them as God's people who are in a world of hurt, and to be able to hold them and give them the appropriate answer. Dr. Murray Brown developed the self-differentiation theory, which applies to human development and family dynamics. And he said, differentiation is the process of freeing yourself from your family's processes to define yourself. This means being able to have different opinions and values than your family members, but being able to stay emotionally connected to them. It means being able to calmly reflect on a conflicted interaction afterwards, realizing your own role in it, and then choosing a different response for the future. So we're not always as non-anxious or as calm as we want to be when we're in an interaction. And I don't know how about you, but I have learned that I have my own sort of warning signs of when I am reverting back into dysfunction. Or at least I'm always in dysfunction, but reverting back into major dysfunction. How's that? So one of them is that when I hear a whine in my voice, I know that I'm feeling like the victim. I'm feeling like it's not fair. I'm feeling like somebody is being mean to me. You know all of that. So when I hear the whine, it tells me maybe I should keep my mouth shut and go home and figure this one out. When I talked about before, when you feel that anxious turmoil in your gut, then you know that you are being anxious about something and you need to step back and breathe and figure out what's going on. Well, the other is that when I may have an interaction in which I look perfectly calm and I hello. When I'm feeling perfectly, I look perfectly calm, but inside I'm in turmoil. But when I go home and I have this story going on in my head, you know what I mean? Where you go over and over that interaction. You think about what you should have said or would have liked to have said. You think about how wrong that other person is and how right you are. All of that tells me I'm in a world of trouble right now because I'm not self-differentiating. I'm thinking that whatever that person said and did was all about me and my worth and what's going on, and that I need to do time out, at least from that person, until I can put my life back together and sort through my feelings and my thoughts so that I can go back to that person, apologize for the parts that I played in whatever that discord was, but then also to be able to listen to where they're coming from, to listen to their story, which they may not be even able to articulate very well, but to be able to sort of say to them, what's going on in your head and in your heart and in your gut that is making you behave in this way, and hopefully helping them hear themselves and sort through their own angst and their own anger. It doesn't always work, and it's not my ultimate responsibility. It's just my job to sort of open up that space for them and not take it personally. I took CPE, which is Clinical Pastoral Education, which every pastor is asked to take as they come through the ordination process, or if they haven't been asked, they should be asked, because it's the best place to learn about that self-differentiation. It's clinical pastoral education is learning basically how to be a chaplain in the hospital. And part of the reason that there's such good training is that, as my supervisor told me, is that when a person comes into a hospital, they're in a world of hope, they're stripped of their clothing, they're put in ridiculous gowns, they're sat in beds, and they are most vulnerable they've ever been in their life. They're confused, they're afraid, all of these things. And when you as a chaplain walk into them and say, good morning, how are you? They might say some things to you that you don't want to hear. Because all sort of barriers or barriers to rudeness and, all that self-control about being polite doesn't work in hospitals very much. And so people will say things to you that are rude, that are mean, that are angry. And he says, your job is to put yourself on your shoulder and watch what goes on, including watching yourself. Instead of immediately reacting and thinking this is about yourself, put yourself on your shoulder and say, wow, this is interesting. And oh, look, your gut is turning up and you are feeling afraid and you're angry or you're scared. Calm down. It's okay. It's okay. This person's in a world of hurt. And just be there for them. And that has helped me in family situations, in church situations. You can imagine when, this guy was standing in front of my face and yelling at me about what I said in the sermon, and I thought he was going to have a heart attack right there, and everybody else was kind of like, watching like this. This little person on my shoulder was saying, oh, like, hey, listen, Joanne, listen, don't take this personally. It's okay. What's going on? Bob's just upset because he expected you to say something else and you didn't say it. It was just chattering in my ear, and I was just kind of breathing, listening to this while Bob was still yelling in my face, and being able to sort of settle down and realize it wasn't about me. He was just a man that the world was changing, and he didn't like the way it was changing, and he had no control over it, and I was the safest person for him to yell at. And in some ways, that's a big compliment. That's a big compliment, that he felt safe enough to yell in my face. Having a non-anxious presence is critical. It comes with that self-differentiation. Then you can not be, you don't have to pick up the anxiety of everybody else in the room. You can be calm. You can take a breath. My kids all joke because my favorite remedy and I think I've probably shared this with this congregation, but whenever my kid, fell down, bumped their knee, got their feelings hurt, whatever, and they would come to me and they were sobbing and crying, the first thing I would ask them is, do you want a glass of water? And they would go, oh, yeah. And one day, one of the older ones, as she was handing the younger one a glass of water, she says, what does water do? And I says, it stops you from crying. So I can talk to you and you can talk to me. It calms you down. It gives you that less anxious kind of upsetness. And then we can deal with the problem. So, take a figurative glass of water, drink of water when you're feeling anxious. My favorite scripture that comes to mind when I think about non-anxious presence is about the story of Jesus, who had sent the disciples on ahead across the Galilean Sea while he prayed, while he was with God. And these fishermen are out and the sea becomes stormy, and so stormy that they think they're going to lose their lives. And for fishermen, that's a pretty big storm. Now you have to understand that water, deep water, in the times of Jesus represented chaos, represented uncontrolled situations. And when Jesus comes walking across that chaotic water, what does he say to the disciples? Don't be afraid. He reaches out his hand for Peter to come across from him. And Peter, his eyes on Jesus, steps out of the boat and starts to walk on water. And then I imagine he goes, oh my gosh, what am I in? And he starts to sink because he took his eyes off Jesus. When we are in places of chaos and pain, we need to remember that God comes to us, whether it's on a ladder, up and down. I asked Angela to put the mirror on the ladders, because when we are in holy, sacred places, it's a place that's safe to look at ourselves and see what needs to happen in order for us to become more fully human that God has created us to be. It's a time to keep our eyes on Jesus, to hold out our hand and let God, Jesus, take hold of it, to listen to the Holy Spirit. Because God created us to be fully human, perfect in love. You notice that none of the heroes that I can see in the Bible ever say to God, okay, I woke up this morning, I'm ready, God, you can use me in any way you want. Every one of them was called. God said, Mason, I need you. I need you to be in the band. They said, I need you, each one of you, to be the person I called you to be. And our usual response is, I'm busy. Sorry, it's not me. I'm not good enough. Can you call tomorrow? I'll put my phone on hold. Whatever. We usually, and that's what the scriptures happens. Jacob wasn't looking for God. Jacob wasn't even a decent person. He was a scoundrel, and God chose him to become the father of nations. Just as God has chosen each and every one of you. And that, my friends, is the good news. Amen.